Hello, welcome to this broadcast of Running on Love with God. My name's Lori Michelle, and I was awakened in April of 2009 to the voice of our Creator, and now I live in Israel, and I broadcast these programs to shed light on important topics that are timely and need wisdom and understanding. I'm here broadcasting, and my friend is in Chicago, Anna Marie. Hi, Anna Marie. And she's my inquisitor who asks me lots of questions to go deeper into topics that need to be discussed. And we have lots to discuss this evening. We are talking about a program that I've named, Have We Lost Our Humanity or Lost Our Connection with God? And if you've watched the news media for the past week or so, there are a lot of arguments and protests regarding the Supreme Court nominee and now the Supreme Court Justice, Judge Kavanaugh. And so I wanted to talk about that more because we're watching very acrimonious protests. Is that the right word?
Yes, it is.
Very, very angry protests against this man. Charges were being brought against him of sexual misconduct when he was a teenager. And I thought this was a very important topic, not because I want to voice my pro or con about the specific man or what he did or didn't do, because I wasn't there, I don't know. But I want to discuss with you, Anna Marie, how we're treating each other, how it unfolded. Was it fair? Is this the way we're supposed to behave? And more importantly, how did we get here? Why is this happening? Why are there so many #MeToo accusations flying around where men are being accused of horrific sexual misconduct and assaults in record number, and women are leading the charge to take these powerful men down? And maybe they should be taken down, maybe they shouldn't be taken down, but I think we need to go deeper and discuss, why is this happening? Why are we seeing this happen? And more importantly, how do we stop it? How do we heal? How do we prevent this from occurring? Because it's happening daily. So do you want to start with questions, or do you want to review?
Well, you've just asked all the questions.
I did. Okay.
Yeah, you asked about 5 in a row. So let's start at the shallow end, and then we'll move to the deeper end on the topic. The first question, this was in your write-up, and you asked, is this the appropriate way to vet out and select anyone for public service? The answer is, of course not. But what would be?
I believe they had a process where they investigated and they interviewed people about Judge Kavanaugh. And if we go back to the beginning of the whole process, we see that the Democrats and the Republicans are at odds. So
Right.
And that's what I put in the write-up for this program, is that we have this kind of seek and destroy mission to stop each other. And people are positioning each other, themselves on one side of the issue or the other within groups, ideological groups. And it's this all or nothing. I'm with this group and I agree with everything they're doing and saying, and I'm against this group. And we're fighting like this. As Americans, nobody seems to be able to get along, and it's horrific. So right from the beginning of the process, the Democrats made it well known that they were going to fight tooth and nail against this nominee and do everything they could to stop it from happening. So what was really unfair with this process was it seemed very political. And the timing of everything seemed political to me. And I might add, I'm not really political at all. In fact, most of my life, I voted democratically for the Democrats. I'm an independent voter, and I vote my conscience, the way I think I should vote. So I'm not Democrat or Republican, but this is really about God. And what does God see in this whole process? And at the end of the day, what do we hope to achieve in this process. So you asked, how could it be fair? It started out fair, or did it? Did it start out fair when Chuck Schumer said, I'm going to do everything possible to stop this nominee because he didn't fit the model of what he felt would be a good justice. He didn't pass the litmus test of what Democrats want on the Supreme Court.
So the way to make it more fair is to take the partisanship out of it, but I don't know how we do that because we've gotten more and more partisan as time has gone on.
It wasn't always this way. In fact, I saw an interview with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and she said it was never partisan like this. It's really a disgrace what's happened. So we have to really analyze what's happened to our country. Why are we fighting like this? How do we make it better? And instead of siding with our political group or our religious group or our ideological group, how do we come together and see the value of the positions on the other side and have some sort of meeting of the minds? Because at the end of the day, we're all Americans and we all want truly the same thing, where people have freedom of speech, freedom. We're a country where we're blessed with freedom. We all, at the end of the day, want to protect each other and have a good life. So where are we going with all of this? What is the goal? What was the goal at the 11th hour when they presented these charges, when they could have vetted Brett Kavanaugh out before? Maybe, perhaps, I believe those accusations came in view before he was even possibly nominated. Was it back in July?
Yeah, I heard June or July.
Yeah, so why wait to the 11th hour? And the whole process of how it happened not only harmed Brett Kavanaugh and his family, but the accuser was made to look foolish and horrible and subjected to all kinds of scrutiny and embarrassing questions and death threats when she wanted this to be private in the first place. So at what cost is this political rivalry, this fighting, where my group has to win over your group? And in the end, we all lose.
You said everything we're watching has deeper meaning and a divine purpose. What is the deeper meaning and or divine purpose behind this whole spectacle?
It brings into view that we're a country that's divided, that we have deep problems, and it exposes that we're on the wrong path. And how are we on the wrong path? We have, and I named the program this, we have not only lost our humanity, we've lost our connection to God. And there are two political groups in this country, it seems, vying for power. One refrains from using and invoking the word God at all costs. And I even heard Barack Obama recently on a YouTube video saying, we don't need Messiah, we just need good people making good decisions. But here we have groups of people, Democrats and Republicans, not making good decisions at all. So we do need God. We do need leadership. We do need guidance from someone who understands and knows what God expects from us, because we've lost our way. And when we lose God, we lose everything. We lose our connection to each other.
So the deeper meaning is to just make it apparent? How?
The deeper meaning behind this is that we're seeing ourselves in a mirror and we're not liking what we're seeing. Social media is exposing a lot of ugliness We have to admit this. We see trolling and nasty language and fighting and arguing. And we see our own president, who I voted for, and I think is doing a lot of good things, speaking nasty rhetoric that is not helpful. While I agree with a lot of the things he says, his speech is not in accordance to the way God has taught us we should speak. And I'm not here to trash President Trump. I voted for him. And I will also add that I was pleased that Brett Kavanaugh was nominated and got the seat on the Supreme Court after all of this. He may not have been my first choice, but I saw the evil that was surrounding the process of his nomination. The lying, the positioning, the last minute accusations that were not corroborated. We're a country of law and order, and we have to prove accusations. And that goes back to the Torah, where you can't just accuse someone and just because they sound credible, hogtie them and whip them and stone them just on an accusation. We're a country of law and order and court system. And this was, at the last second, quite unfair. The whole process was unfair. And what I felt was, it was allowing evil to win. If he were not to get the nomination, the evil that was surrounding him, the bipartisanship, the partisanship, the opposite, the partisanship that we were seeing, the anger and the hostility and the protests shouldn't decide right from wrong. We shouldn't have mob rule. Which leads me to another example. After we finished this one, I saw there was a court case in Chicago that I want to talk about, where a police officer was just found guilty of second-degree murder. But
then I'll go to your final question on this one, and then we can go into
and then we'll transfer to a new topic.
Okay, so your final question was, we will explore why this is happening and how we can come together and solve this crisis.
Right. The divine purposes that we're talking about it, that the world's talking about it. But what really needs to be spoken about is using this as a teaching moment. And I sent you an article that I didn't have a chance to read. I saw it posted on social media, and I hope you read it. Maybe you can shed light as to what it said. But it said, let's use this as a teaching moment. And that was perfect when I saw that. But I didn't have time to read it before we came on the broadcast. Can you tell me and summarize what it said?
I read it. I don't know how good my reading comprehension is, but the two things I remembered was that there were two parts about parents teach your girls about what situations to get into and who to hang out with, and parents teach your boys about who they keep company with, how they treat everyone in their lives.
Right.
And to everyone, remember now, everything can follow you the rest of your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I thought that was excellent that we're not hearing enough about that. We're hearing about Me Too and anti-Kavanaugh and Kavanaugh and all of this rhetoric and all these protests, but who's talking about what we need to learn from all of this? And what I would love to see is Brett Kavanaugh come out one day and talk about his behavior in high school and how that's not acceptable behavior for young men, that it's not okay. He shouldn't defend that as boys will be boys, that boys just got drunk, I was just 16. It's not okay. We need to go back to the 80s and even now, what's going on with our children, and examine what we want for them. What do we learn from this? How have we gone wrong? Should Dr. Ford have been 15 years old in a bathing suit at a party drinking beer with boys? And this is where we have lost our way and our connection to God, because God gave us rules of engagement where those kinds of situations shouldn't happen if we're following his rules. People don't want to hear that, because I see a lot of people protesting. I even saw a picture on the media of girls protesting the Kavanaugh appointment, and they were wearing midriff shirts and cleavage and bare midriff and pants that had holes in them right up to their crotch. And I'm not here to criticize different girls or criticize even Dr. Ford for being 15 and being in that situation, because you don't want to criticize a potential victim, alleged victim. But we have to examine, what are we teaching our girls? What are we teaching our boys? Would Brett Kavanaugh, now Justice Kavanaugh, want his young girls going to a party where there were boys as drunk as he and his friends were when he was 17 and 16 years old? I would guess not.
Yeah, I can't imagine that he would want that.
So this is a teaching moment. We need to use this as a divine moment where God is allowing this to come out and expose itself and show us where we're losing our humanity, but most importantly, we're losing our connection to him.
Okay, so now, does that relate to the second situation you wanted to talk about?
I thought of that because I mentioned mob rule. Mob rule, okay. Meaning we see a lot of protests and we see a lot of charges being brought up on people after the fact, a year later, because people protest and they find videos and they make judgments and they gather together and they protest, and it's this kind of mob fever. And we had that with Kavanaugh, where people were protesting and trying to be heard. And protests is American, but these angry mob protests are intimidating, and they intimidate politicians and law enforcement, and it's frightening. And this situation with, his name was Jason Van Dyke, was just found guilty, 16 counts of second-degree murder. And
no, I thought it was a single count of second-degree murder and 16 charges of assault.
Oh, I thought it was 16 of both. I didn't realize.
Oh, it was? Okay. Sorry.
I'm not here to review the case, and I'm not here to second-guess the jury. My thought is he went through a trial. The jury were good Americans who did their very best, and we have to accept the verdict, because that's the way we are as Americans. We have a system of law. But what I'm concerned about is the outcome, and what's the take-home message, and what do we get from this? In other words, this is a police officer who was in a situation and he shot 16 times and he killed a young boy. But we have police officers all over the country putting their life at risk to protect us, right? And they're given a weapon, and this man, according to the jury, made a bad decision. But was he a cold-hearted murderer? I don't know that can be argued. He got on the stand, he cried, he, in the moment, thought he was making the best decision, thought the perpetrator was trying to get away. I'm not here to retry the case. The case was tried, and that's the verdict. What I want to discuss is, to what end? What are we achieving with this verdict? This man's going to go to prison. Are we safer with him in prison? Is that really what we want at the end of the day? And going back to the Christine Ford accusation, let's say it happened 35 years ago and she can't prove it. To what end bringing up these charges now? What did she want to achieve? To take a man down, destroy his life, his credibility, and his career? Or to stop these kinds of things from happening yet again and again and again, and stopping the cycle of violence. So what we have is a moment of truth where we need to teach ourselves and learn and expose the problems and decide what is our goal here. What is the goal of the boy who was killed, McDonald, who was killed, his family? What is the ultimate goal? I saw on the media people celebrating and exultant and cheering that this man's going to prison. Is that really how we should be behaving as Americans? It's a tragedy. A boy died at 17 years old, and now a man's life is virtually over. I assume he has children. I think he has children and a wife. It's a crisis. We're at crisis. So should we be out in the street celebrating when a man is going to prison? I'm asking the question, Anne-Marie, what is the goal? Nobody's asking what's the goal? What are we learning from this? How do we stop this from happening? How do we come together and heal ourselves? And the only way to heal ourselves is to really understand, why did this happen in the first place? And how do we prevent it from happening again? And I would argue that sending this man to a penitentiary for 6+ years is not making us safer. As a matter of fact, I question whether police are going to feel safe going out and doing their job to protect the public, and perhaps hesitate before they shoot someone. And people will say, well, they should hesitate. Well, what if they hesitate, and because they don't do their duty and shoot a perpetrator, that perpetrator gets loose and kills people the next day?
So what's the takeaway here? What should people be doing instead? How should we be changing? How should we be reacting? Because like you said, the jury heard all the evidence, they made their decision. That's that. Is your objection the way people celebrated after the verdict?
People need to think in every moment, what would God want? And stop trying to be God. These mobs, these people who were so against Brett Kavanaugh when they don't really know what happened 35 years ago, were trying to vilify him and destroy his life. Truly. Jason Van Dyke, they weren't there in his shoes. There has to be some compassion. Here's a police officer who was called to a scene. There was a crime happening. I believe he was breaking into cars. Am I right? Mm-hmm. He had a weapon, and he wasn't responding to his request to drop the weapon and stop. But in that moment, but we saw, or I didn't see actually, the video that they saw, the jury saw, was overwhelming, that it was an overwhelming use of force. And that might be true. And I'm gonna say that's their decision, so that's the verdict. But we're not God. And in that moment, a police officer made his best decision, and his best decision was flawed. We need to examine why he made that decision and how to prevent other officers from making that decision. Sending him to prison for 6 years and making officers afraid to do their job is not achieving the goal of making us safer. I also read in Chicago, just in the past week, I believe 2 people were shot at point blank range in a park in Chicago. Am I right?
It was in Rogers Park. That's a community in Chicago. Yes.
One was on Simchas Torah. We took a break for the Jewish holidays, so I was celebrating Simchas Torah, and this was an Orthodox Jewish boy, 24 years old. I have 3 children in their 20s, and he was shot point blank range, executed. And this is what the Chicago police are dealing with. murderers. So what's the goal? Where's the compassion? I asked in my title of this program, have we lost our humanity or lost our connection to God? And the answer is, we've lost both. Our humanity. This man is a husband and a father. Is he a cold-blooded murderer and a terrorist? Not likely. Did he make a mistake? He admitted that in that moment, this is what he was feeling. He was feeling under threat. And I also read that all the shots happened within 15 seconds. It was very quick. So we can't pretend that we know and that we're God. We need to make our best decision, and our decisions must be based on what's the end goal? How do we make ourselves safer? How do we come together? How do we have more compassion? How do we protect our children? And this officer should have compassion from the young boy's family who lost their son. He's not just a criminal, he's someone's child. And that's where we have to be more humane and more compassionate to each other. We need to use these as teaching moments, as that article that I sent you stated. We need to look deeper into what's the take-home message? What are we going to learn from all of this? How do we make it better?
Do we need to start looking at the other side and trying to understand both sides in every issue? Would that help us feel more compassion?
We always need to do that. We always need to do that. At the end of every day and every situation, we need to think about every thought, every action, every utterance out of our mouths, and think about how it's being received on the other end. I'm concerned because the police in this country are under attack. They're being executed, and the murder rate in Chicago is arguably the highest in the country. Is it?
I don't know, but it's terrible.
It's terrible. I once said to you that I read in one weekend there were more murders in Chicago than in the entire country of Israel. And we're at war. You could argue that Israel's at war. It's a terrible situation. And that's one city in the entire country of the United States of America. So we need to examine what's going on here. Why are we suffering? And it's disingenuous to say, if I had a child, God forbid, who was caught stealing, and then the officer shot him dead, I would be upset. I would want to know why that happened. I would want justice to be served, but I would be going inward and examining, why was my son stealing? Why did my son have a weapon? We can't minimize the fact, I read that it was a 3-inch knife. Someone might say, oh, it was only a little knife. In Israel, little knives are killing many people. It's a horrific powder keg, and it's blowing up right in our face. So we need to go inward, but we also need to reach upward. We need to know what God's laws are. And in the case of Judge Kavanaugh and Dr. Ford, what happened back in high school? Let's not defend it. Let's teach our children and use this as a teaching moment and understand that the behavior they engaged in back then, whether the assault took place or not, that kind of behavior among young children or young adults, I know you don't like it when I say children, because teenagers to me are babies. It's not okay. It's just not okay. So I hope this sheds some light. We have not only lost our humanity, we've lost our connection to God, and we need to rekindle our connection to God, reach higher and harder for Him than ever before. He has laws. Let's not take this for granted that we know everything, because we're here to learn and reach for Him and get it right. Go to lauriemichelle.net and look at the other videos that I have there and the other programs. And there'll be more of these. And God willing, in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to announce that I'm publishing my first book. So stay tuned. And this is the work of world peace. If we learn how to get it right and heal ourselves, we can heal each other and bring peace in our time. God bless you.